The sound stopped her in her tracks. A thin, broken cry. Not a bird, not a child, something smaller. She turned toward the storm drain at the corner of the street. The traffic had passed, the world was quiet, but the cry came again, wet, desperate, trembling. She bent down. Inside the grate, a tiny shape clung to the slimy concrete. A kitten, soaked to the bone, claws slipping on the edge. Its head bobbed weakly above the shallow water. Eyes wide, mouth opening and closing without sound. Her heart lurched. She dropped her purse, reached through the bars. Cold water splashed against her sleeve as she scooped it up. The body was feather-light. Too light. The kitten shivered violently against her chest. She pulled it close, wrapping it in her scarf. Only then did she notice her fingers. Sticky. Dark streaks clung to the fur, staining her skin. It wasn't mud. It wasn't oil. It smelled wrong. Sharp. Chemical. She stared at the trembling creature in her arms, her stomach tightening with dread. Someone had done this. Someone had wanted this kitten to drown. But why? Subscribe for the channel. And tell me, what would you do if you found this kitten? She hurried down the street, clutching the bundle of her tight against her chest. The kitten's cries were faint now, a thin vibration against the damp fabric of her scarf. Each step she took felt heavy, as though the little life in her arms was running out of time. By the time she reached her front porch, her hands were trembling as much as the animal she carried. She fumbled with the keys, muttering, "It's okay, baby, just hold on." The door creaked open, and she rushed inside. The warmth of the house closed around them, but the kitten didn't stop shivering. She laid it gently on the kitchen counter, then tore through the cabinet for an old towel. She wrapped it around the kitten's fragile body, rubbing softly, trying to coax the chill out. The towel grew damp almost instantly. Water seeped into her hands, carrying with it the strange dark residue she had noticed before. Her fingertips stuck together. It wasn't mud. It wasn't dirt. The smell confirmed it. Sharp, chemical, almost like glue. Her chest tightened. This wasn't an accident. The kitten stirred weakly under the towel. When she lifted the cloth, its tiny face tilted up at her. Its eyes were glassy, half shut. But when her hand brushed its cheek, a faint sound rose from its chest. A broken purr. She froze, breath catching in her throat. Even in pain, it was trying to trust her. "Who did this to you?" she whispered. She carried the kitten into the bathroom, turned the tap on low. The water came warm, steaming gently in the sink. She dipped her fingers in first, then lowered the kitten carefully. The reaction was immediate. The kitten's body stiffened. It let out a sharp cry, a sound so piercing it echoed in the small room. She almost dropped it, heart lurching. The residue seemed to burn when the water touched it. The kitten clawed at the edge of the sink, desperate to escape. "Sure, it's okay. I won't hurt you," she whispered, pulling it out quickly. She sat back in the towel, rocking it like an infant. Its cries softened, but its tiny body still quivered in her arms. Her mind raced. If this substance was burning it, was it poison? Was it eating into the skin? She tried again, dipping just a corner of the towel into the warm water and dabbing lightly at one of the dark patches. The kitten flinched but didn't scream this time. Slowly, carefully, she wiped away a small streak. The fur beneath was raw, reddened, clumped. She swallowed hard. Her house felt too quiet. The tick of the kitchen clock in the other room sounded loud, almost mocking. She wanted someone beside her, someone who knew what to do. Her husband would have known. He'd been the one who always found strays, always brought them home, always nursed them back to health. But he wasn't here anymore. She tightened her grip on the kitten, blinking back the sting in her eyes. "You've got me now," she murmured. "That's enough. It has to be." She moved to the living room, setting the kitten on the couch with a heating pad beneath the towel. She fetched a small saucer of milk, though she knew it wasn't ideal for such a young creature. The kitten sniffed at it weakly, but turned its head away. Its strength wasn't there yet. She sat beside it, stroking the fur between its ears. The stickiness still clung to her fingertips, refusing to wash away completely. She could smell it every time she raised her hand. The thought grew louder in her mind. Someone had done this. Someone had taken this defenseless creature, poured something cruel over its body, and left in the drain to die. The image turned her stomach. She shook her head, trying to push it away. The kitten stirred again, pressing closer against her palm, and let out that faint, rattling purr. Despite everything, despite the pain, it wanted to live. Her chest ached. She whispered, "I'll get you through tonight." For the next hour, she sat with it, dabbing gently at its fur, working bit by bit to clear the residue. Each time she touched the inflamed skin, the kitten whimpered, but she pressed on, murmuring soft apologies. Dark streaks stained the towel. The smell clung to the room. But slowly, patches of soft fur began to reappear beneath the mess. When the kitten finally drifted into a restless sleep, she leaned back against the couch, exhausted. Her hand lingered on its tiny chest, feeling the fragile rise and fall. She told herself she'd take it to the vet first thing in the morning, but as her eyes lingered on the strange stain still matted into the fur, she felt a chill. This wasn't just rescue. This was the beginning of something she didn't yet understand. And whoever had done this, what if they weren't finished? The house was quiet. Too quiet. She had turned off the television hours ago. Even the clock in the kitchen seemed muted, its ticking dulled beneath the weight of her thoughts. Only one sound carried through the room now. The ragged, uneven breasts of the tiny creature curled beneath the blanket. The kitten hadn't touched the milk. It hadn't touched the soft kibble she had crushed into crumbs. It hadn't even licked at the warm water she offered on her fingertip. It just shivered, pressed into folds of the towel, its eyes opening now and then to search her face. She sat on the floor beside the couch, knees drawn up, refusing to leave it alone. She tried reading. She tried knitting. She even tried closing her eyes for a moment. But every time the kitten shifted, her body jerked awake, heart hammering. It reminded her of the nights she had once kept watch by another bed. The memory came without warning. The oxygen machine. The soft, steady beeping. Her husband's hand in hers, thin and warm and slipping away. Her throat tightened. She reached the kitten, brushing her fingers across its damp fur. "You're not going anywhere," she whispered. "Not tonight." The kitten stirred faintly, pushing its nose against her palm. A faint purr rose from its chest, weak, broken, but still alive. She felt her eyes burn. She hadn't realized how empty the house had felt these last 2 years. Friends had visited. Neighbors had dropped off food, but no one had stayed. At night, the silence had stretched endlessly, pressing against her until she could barely breathe. Now, here was this trembling scrap of life, small enough to fit in her hand, weak enough that every hour mattered. Yet somehow it filled the silence in a way nothing else had. She leaned closer, murmuring softly, "I'll keep you safe. You'll see. We'll both see." The kitten's ears twitched, and for a moment she imagined and understood. Hours crawled by. She moved only to change the towel when it grew too damp with the residue. She continued to dab away. The smell clung stubbornly, bitter and chemical, no matter how many times she washed her hands. She couldn't shake the thought that it was inside the kitten now, too, seeping through its skin. She considered calling the emergency vet, but the clock read nearly midnight, and she couldn't bear the thought of jostling the fragile thing through the cold night air. It might not survive the drive. It needed warmth, stillness, the steady comfort of her presence. So she stayed. The lamp by the couch threw a soft glow across the room. Its light pooled over the kitten, painting the edges of its fur in gold. Her eyes began to blur, heavy from exhaustion. She shook herself awake again and again, refusing to let sleep take her. Then the sound came, a sudden, weak cry, high-pitched, desperate. She sat upright, heart lurching. The kitten writhed beneath the towel, its small body spasming. She reached out, scooping it into her hands. "It's okay. Shoo, it's okay," she whispered, rocking it against her chest. The cry faded, replaced by ragged breathing. The kitten's body pressed against her palm. She tilted it toward the lamplight, searching for the cause. That was when she saw it, the residue still clinging to its fur. It shimmered under the lamp, faintly iridescent, a dull, unnatural glow, almost as though the chemical itself was alive. Her breath caught. She blinked, certain she was imagining it. But no. There was again a soft luminescence threading through the sticky streaks, pulsing faintly in rhythm with the kitten's heartbeat. She ran a finger over the patch, then pulled back quickly. It was warm, warmer than the rest of the fur. A chill spread through her body. "What on earth did they put on you?" she whispered. The kitten whimpered, curling tighter in her hands. The glow dimmed, fading as its breathing slowed. She watched, transfixed, as the light sank back into the shadows of its matted coat. Her skin prickled. She glanced around the room, suddenly uneasy, as though someone else might be watching. But the house was still silent, cloaked in midnight. She tightened her grip on the kitten. Whatever this was, it wasn't normal. And it wasn't just cruelty anymore. Something about this substance, it was different. Dangerous. The kitten shivered once more, then went limp, asleep in her hands. She exhaled shakily, lowering it back onto the heating pad. Her heart hammered in her chest, refusing to slow. She sank back against the couch, eyes fixed on the glowing stain still faintly visible beneath the lamp. Tonight had been long, but the night wasn't over yet, and she was beginning to realize this was only the beginning. The sun had barely risen when she placed the kitten in a basket lined with an old wool sweater. The night had been long. She hadn't slept at all, not even when exhaustion pulled at her eyes. She couldn't. Each time she tried, the faint glow on the kitten's fur flickered again in her memory, pulling her back into wakefulness. Now, in the pale morning light, the glow was gone. The residue was still there, clinging stubbornly to its coat, but the strange shimmer had vanished as though it had never existed. She brushed a hand over the kitten's head. Its eyes opened, dull and heavy, yet it pressed its nose weakly against her finger. That was enough. Enough to keep her moving. The drive to the vet's office was quiet except for the kitten's uneven breathing. She kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting against the basket, as though her touch alone could anchor it to life. When she walked into the clinic, the receptionist's smile faltered at the sight of the bundle in her arms. "Oh, dear, what happened?" "Found him in a drain," the woman murmured. Her voice fell hollow. "He's covered in something. I don't know what." They hurried her into an exam room. The vet, a middle-aged man with silver hair and kind eyes, lifted the kitten with practiced gentleness. He turned it this way and that, his face tightening as he studied the fur. "This isn't dirt," he said quietly, "and it's not oil." She swallowed. "I thought it might be glue." "Not exactly." He leaned closer, sniffing. "Industrial sealant, the kind used for construction. Sticky, toxic. If ingested, it could burn the throat, the stomach." Her stomach dropped. "You mean someone poured this on him?" The vet looked at her, his expression heavy. "This doesn't happen by accident." The words settled like stones in her chest. She glanced down at the kitten on the metal table, so small against the harsh silver surface. It tried to lift its head, then collapsed again with a faint mew. "Can you save him?" she asked, her voice breaking. The vet hesitated. "We'll do everything we can. But he's weak, malnourished, and with his residue, he's lucky to be alive at all." She nodded, clutching her sweater tighter around her arms. When she stepped back out into the morning air, the kitten swaddled once more in her arms. She felt eyes on her. Two women at the bus stop had turned to watch. A man paused by his car, frowning. Word spread fast in small towns. By the time she reached the grocery store to pick up kitten formula, the whispers had already started. A neighbor stopped her in the aisle, glancing at the basket. "That the kitten?" She nodded cautiously. "They're saying someone dumped it in the drain, covered it in something." The neighbor shook her head. "Terrible. But you know, strays bring trouble. Maybe it's best not to get involved." The word stung. She didn't answer, just tightened her grip on the basket and walked away. At the register, she caught two cashiers murmuring as they rang her up. Their voices lowered when she glanced their way, but the look in their eyes lingered, pity mixed with unease. By afternoon, 3 more people had come by her house. One left a can of food on her porch. Another offered a blanket. The third simply stood at the gate, staring before muttering, You shouldn't have brought it home. She ignored them all. Inside, the kitten lay curled on the couch, weak but alive, its belly slightly fuller after the first few sips of formula. She sat beside it, stroking its fur. The whispers outside the walls pressed against her, heavy and suffocating. She thought of her husband again. He would have faced them, chin high, daring anyone to tell him he shouldn't fight for something helpless. She whispered, "I'll do the same for you." The kitten stirred, purring faintly, and she felt resolve harden in her chest. If someone in this town had done this on purpose, if someone thought they could throw away a life and let it drown in a storm drain, they were wrong. She would protect this kitten, no matter what it cost, even if it meant standing against the whole town. The first note arrived 2 days later. She found it folded in half, tucked between bills in her mailbox. At first, she thought it was an advertisement, just another flyer. But when she unfolded the sheet, her stomach turned cold. Blocky black letters stared back at her. Stay out of it. No name, no signature, just 3 words. She looked up and down the street. It was morning, quiet, the usual shuffle of neighbors walking dogs and carrying coffee. No one seemed to notice her. No one looked her way. Still, she felt exposed, as though every eye had been on her the moment she touched that paper. Inside, she crumpled the note and shoved it into a drawer. She told herself it was nothing. Kids being cruel, a prank. But deep down, she knew better. That afternoon, as she brought in groceries, her neighbor, an older man who often sat on his porch, called out to her. "You ought to be careful," he said, nodding toward the basket at her side. She hesitated. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's been trouble lately. Kids, teenagers with nothing to do. Strays have been going missing. Some say they've been hurt." Her throat tightened. "You think?" "I don't know," the man muttered, shaking his head. "But it wouldn't surprise me. Don't let that little one out of your sight." She thanked him, though the words fell hollow. Her hands shook as she carried the kitten inside. The kitten, for its part, was growing stronger. It ate eagerly now, lapping up formula from the small dish she placed on the counter. It stumbled across the floor on wobbly legs, following her from room to room. If she left the kitchen, it was there. If she went upstairs, it mewed at the bottom step until she returned. It was like a shadow stitched to her heels, fragile yet determined. She found comfort in its presence. The house no longer felt so empty. At night, when she sat reading by the lamp, it curled against her thigh, purring softly, as though it had always belonged there. But the peace never lasted long. The second note came 3 nights later, slipped beneath her door this time. "You can't save them all." She tore it up, flushed the pieces down the sink, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving past her window. She held her breath, straining to listen. The kitten stirred beside her, letting out a small cry. The sound seemed to echo in the dark room. The footsteps paused. Her heart thudded painfully. She gripped the edge of the blanket, waiting, praying for them to move on. After a long silence, they did. The faint crunch of gravel faded into nothing. Still, she didn't sleep again. By morning, she was exhausted, but her resolve burned stronger. Whoever was trying to frighten her didn't understand. She had lost too much already. She would not lose this kitten too. The third note arrived the next evening. This one wasn't tucked away. It was pinned to her fence with a rusted nail, plain for anyone to see. Neighbors noticed. One woman across the street shook her head, whispering to another. A man passing by muttered, "Foolishness," under his breath. But she stood on her porch with the kitten in her arms, clutching it tight, staring at the note until her vision blurred. "I don't care," she whispered to the tiny creature pressed against her chest. "I won't give you up. Not now. Not ever." The kitten purred, small and steady, as though answering her. That night, she kept every light in the house on. Shadows shifted against the curtains, but none crossed her doorstep. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching her. When the clock struck midnight, she rose from the couch and carried the kitten to the window. Outside, the street lay empty, bathed in the glow of a single flickering street lamp. But just as she began to turn away, she saw it, a figure, at the edge of her yard, too far to make out clearly, standing still, watching, her breath caught. She froze, clutching the kitten tighter. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, the figure turned and slipped back into the dark. She didn't follow. Couldn't. Instead, she whispered into the kitten's fur, voice trembling but firm. "They won't take you from me, no matter what it costs." And she meant it, because she had already decided. If it came to it, she would stand her ground. She had lost her husband. She had lived in silence and grief. But she would not live in fear. Not anymore. This kitten had given her something back she thought she'd never feel again. Purpose, hope, a reason to fight. And fight she would, even if it meant facing the darkness outside her door. The air outside was heavy that evening, pressing against the windows, thick with stillness that felt wrong. She knew it before it happened. She had felt it building for days, the notes, the footsteps, the figure in the dark. Tonight would not pass quietly. The kitten lay curled in her lap as she sat in her armchair by the window. Its breathing was steady now, stronger, the fragile rise and fall replaced by a rhythm that reassured her. It had grown braver, too, padding across the house on confident paws, climbing onto counters as though it owned the place. But tonight it seemed restless. Its ears flicked at every sound. Its eyes darted toward the door again and again. She stroked its back. "I know," she whispered. "I feel it, too." Then came the sound, gravel shifting, feet moving outside her gate. She held her breath, heart pounding. The kitten leapt from her lap, padding to the door, tail twitching. A knock rattled the wood. Hard, not the polite rap of a neighbor, but a demand. Her blood ran cold. Another knock, louder, followed by laughter, young, sharp, mocking. Her hands shook as she moved toward the door. She didn't open it, only pressed her ear against the wood. Voices drifted through. Old woman thinks she can save every stray. Let's show her what happens. Bet she cries. A cold dread filled her chest. She stepped back, clutching the kitten as it hissed, fur bristling. The sound startled her. She had never heard a hiss before. Then came the crash, something thrown against the porch. Glass shattered. She gasped, heart hammering. "Leave!" she shouted, her voice trembling but loud. "I've called the police." Laughter again, footsteps shifting. Another crash, this time against the fence. The kitten squirmed in her arms, wriggling free. Before she could stop it, it darted toward the window. She hurried after it, but froze as she saw what happened next. The kitten leapt onto the windowsill, tiny body arched, back for standing tall. It hissed again, sharper this time, claw into glass as though daring the shadows outside. The laughter faltered. "What the—" "It's crazy. Stupid cat." But the kitten kept going, clawing, yowling, the sound raw and fierce. And then it did something more. It struck the lamp core with its paw, sending the light toppling. The lamp crashed to the floor, the bulb bursting. The sudden noise shattered the stillness, loud enough to echo through the quiet street. A dog barked from across the way. A porch light flicked on. A window opened. Neighbors were waking, watching. "What's going on out there?" A man shouted from his yard. "Who's making all that noise?" Another called. The figures at her gate froze. She could see them now. 3 boys no older than 16, their faces pale in the porch light, their hands still clutching rocks. The mocking laughter was gone. In its place, panic. "Run." One hissed, but they didn't get the chance. The neighbor from across the street was already stepping off his porch, his voice booming. "What are you doing at her house?" Others followed. Doors opened. More lights flicked on. Within minutes, half the street was awake, gathered, murmuring, glaring at the boys who stood frozen in the glow of judgment. The woman stepped onto her porch, the kitten at her feet, its tiny body still bristling with defiance. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "They poured poison on him," she said into the night. "They left him in the drain to die." A hush fell. The boys shifted uneasily. "It was just a joke," one muttered. "Just a cat," another added. "Just a cat." Her voice cracked. "You tried to kill him. You left him to suffer. And then you came here to frighten me into silence." The neighbors stared. Some gasped. Others shook their heads in disgust. The man from across the street stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "You'll answer for this," he growled at the boys. "We won't allow this in our town." The boys broke then, stumbling backward, dropping their rocks, fleeing down the street as voices rose against them. The woman stood trembling on the porch, the kitten weaving around her ankles, still growling in its tiny, broken way. The neighbors turned to her, their faces softened. Some nodded, others whispered words of support. A woman came forward, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said. "Don't ever doubt it." One by one, they drifted back to their homes. The lights dimmed. The street grew quiet again. But the quiet was different now. Not heavy, not suffocating. A protective silence, lined with the knowledge that she was no longer alone. Inside, she sank into her armchair, the kitten curling against her chest. Her hands still trembled, but her heart was steady. She looked down at the small face nestled against her. Its eyes were bright, unafraid. Its purr rumbled deep, strong and sure. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "You were never just a stray. You were meant to find me." The kitten blinked slowly, pressing its nose against her chin. She closed her eyes, holding it close, and for the first time in years, she felt whole again,